On a storm-lashed Cornish cliff, the black rock lighthouse stands dark, its beacon silenced. A keeper lies dead on a locked balcony, his hands charred by a mysterious electrocution. Hercule Poirot, the master of mysteries, steps into the shadows of suspicion. Was it the nervous assistant, the scarred sailor, or the slick merchant hiding a deadly secret? Smuggling, sabotage, and a cunning trap weave a web of deceit. Can Poirot's little gray cells unravel the truth before the next ship meets the rocks? The light is out, but the truth will shine. Chapter 1. The Shuttered Light. The wind howled across the Cornish cliffs, carrying with it the sharp tang of salt and the distant roar of the sea. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the wild weather, stood at the edge of the promontory, his gloved hands clasped about his ebony cane. His small, polished shoes, so out of place on the jagged rocks, gleamed faintly in the overcast light. Beside him, Captain Hastings shivered, pulling his coat tighter against the chill. His honest face creased with unease as he gazed at the towering silhouette of the black rock lighthouse. Its great beacon, which should have blazed like a star to guide ships through the treacherous waters below, was dark, a silent sentinel in a restless world. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice precise and measured despite the gale's attempt to snatch it away. "A lighthouse without its light is a most melancholy thing. It is as if the very soul of the place has been extinguished. And when death accompanies such silence, one must suspect the hand of malice." Hastings nodded, though his thoughts were less poetic. "Dashed queer business, Poirot. A locked balcony, a dead man, and the light gone out. It's enough to give anyone the creeps." They had been summoned to this desolate stretch of coast by a telegram from Inspector Japp, who now awaited them at the lighthouse's base. The iron door, weathered by years of salt and spray, creaked as Japp pushed it open, his broad face grim under the brim of his hat. "Glad you could make it, Mr. Poirot," he said, shaking hands with a briskness that belied his unease. "This is a nasty one. Thomas Eldridge, head keeper here, was found dead this morning on the balcony up top, door bolted from the inside, and the beacon's been out since last night. The locals are in a right state. Say it's bad luck for the ships." Poirot's green eyes narrowed, his mustache twitching slightly as he absorbed the information. "And the cause of death, Inspector? What does the doctor say?" "Electrocution, if you can believe it," Japp replied, leading them up the narrow, spiral staircase that wound like a corkscrew through the lighthouse's core. "But there's no wiring on that balcony, and the beacon itself seems in order. It's a puzzle, and no mistake." The climb was steep, the air growing colder and more metallic as they ascended. Poirot, despite his fastidious nature, moved with surprising agility, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the iron steps. Hastings, puffing slightly, marveled at his friend's composure. "You'd think he was strolling through Mayfair," he muttered to himself. At the top, they emerged into the beacon room, a circular chamber dominated by the massive Fresnel lens, its prisms catching what little light filtered through the storm clouds. The room was a marvel of precision, all polished brass and gleaming glass, but it felt lifeless without the beacon's glow. Japp gestured to the heavy iron door leading to the balcony. "That's where we found him. Bolted shut, as I said. Had to break it open to get to the body." Poirot stepped forward, his keen eyes scanning the room. He noted the orderly arrangement of tools on a workbench, the faint smell of oil, and the slight disarray of papers on a small desk. Nothing dramatic, but enough to suggest a disturbance. "And the body, it remains where it was found?" he asked. Jap nodded. "Doctor's been and gone, but we left everything as it was for you. Knew you'd want to see it yourself." They stepped through the broken door onto the balcony, a narrow platform encircled by a low railing. The wind struck them like a physical force, and Hastings gripped the rail to steady himself. Below, the sea churned, waves crashing against the rocks with a violence that made the cliff seem to tremble. Thomas Eldridge's body lay crumpled near the railing, his weathered face frozen in a rictus of pain. His hands, blackened and blistered, were clenched as if grasping at something unseen. His oilskin coat was singed at the edges, and a faint, acrid scent lingered, distinct from the sea air. Poirot knelt beside the body, his movements deliberate, almost reverent. He examined the hands, the burns, the rigidity of the limbs. "Electrocution, you say," he murmured. "Yet no wires, no visible source. Curious, n'est-ce pas?" He rose, his gaze shifting to the beacon room behind them. "And the light, it was extinguished when the body was found?" "Dead as a doornail," Jap confirmed. "Gibbs, the assistant keeper, noticed it at dawn when he came up to check. Says he found Eldridge and raised the alarm." Poirot's eyes lingered on the beacon's mechanism, a complex array of gears and wires, now silent. He stepped back inside, circling the lens with the air of a man inspecting a fine piece of art. "A timed device, perhaps?" he said, almost to himself. "Something to stop the light at a precise moment, leaving no trace of interference." Hastings frowned, his practical mind struggling with the implications. But why put out the light? And how did anyone get in or out with that door bolted? "It's impossible, Poirot." "Impossible?" Poirot's voice held a note of amusement, though his expression remained grave. "Non, Hastings, the impossible is merely the possible in disguise. We must look closer. At the door, the beacon, the man, himself. Somewhere in these details lies the truth, like a diamond buried in the sand." He turned to Jap. "Tell me, Inspector, who was here last night? Who had access to this place?" Jap scratched his chin. "3 men, as far as we know. Henry Gibbs, the assistant keeper, was on duty with Eldridge. Then there's Caleb Morrow, a sailor who docked nearby after a storm. Says he came to talk about repairs to the supply boat. And Victor Slade, a local merchant. Bit of a shady character, if you ask me. Brought supplies yesterday evening." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. 3 men, each with their own reasons to be here. And one, perhaps, with a reason to kill. We shall meet them, Inspector, and see what secrets they carry. As they descended the stairs, the wind seemed to carry a whisper of the lighthouse's lost light, urging Poirot's little gray cells into motion. The game, as he often called it, had begun. Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The Black Rock Lighthouse stood defiant against the Cornish storm, its stone tower unyielding to the wind's relentless assault. Inside, the beacon room was a cathedral of glass and metal, its massive Fresnel lens looming like a silent deity. The air was heavy with the scent of oil and brass, tinged with something sharper, something unnatural. Hercule Poirot, his small frame dwarfed by the machinery, moved with the precision of a watchmaker, his eyes darting over every surface. Captain Hastings followed, his face a mixture of awe and unease, while Inspector Jap stood by the iron door to the balcony, arms crossed, his expression one of grim impatience. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, pausing to adjust his immaculate gloves. This room, it is a marvel of human ingenuity, yet it holds a secret most sinister. A man is dead, the light is extinguished, and the door is bolted. The puzzle, it is exquisite. Hastings, less enthused by the poetic, peered through the broken door to the balcony where Thomas Eldridge's body lay. The wind howled outside, tugging at his coat, and he shivered. Exquisite or not, Poirot, it's a dashed grim business. Electrocution, Japp says. But how? There's nothing out there but air and iron. Japp nodded, stepping forward. That's the rub, mister. Poirot, the doctor's certain it's electrocution. Those burns on his hands and the state of his body don't lie. But there's no wiring on the balcony, no exposed cables, nothing. And the beacon's mechanism checks out fine, far as we can tell. It's as if the devil himself reached down and struck him. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. The devil, Inspector. No, I think we deal with a human hand, one clever enough to make us believe in the supernatural. Let us begin with the facts, and the little gray cells, they shall do the rest. He approached the balcony door, its iron surface scarred from where Japp's men had forced it open. The bolt, heavy and rusted, was still in place, slid firmly into its socket. Poirot ran a gloved finger along its edge, noting the faint scratches where the metal met the frame. This bolt, he said, it was engaged when the body was found, oui? Dead certain, Japp replied. Gibbs, the assistant keeper, tried the door at dawn when he saw the light was out. Couldn't budge it, had to fetch a crowbar to get through. Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing as he examined the door frame. A tiny notch, no wider than a hairpin, marred the wood near the bolt. He produced a small magnifying glass from his pocket and studied it closely. Interesting, he murmured. A mark so small, yet it speaks volumes. Perhaps a tool was used, a wire, a blade, to manipulate this bolt from outside. We must consider all possibilities. Hastings frowned, his practical mind grappling with the idea. But why go to such trouble? If someone wanted Eldridge dead, why not just push him off the balcony? It's a long drop to the rocks. Poirot turned, his expression one of gentle reproach. Mon ami, a push is crude, and our killer is not crude. This death, it was planned with care, with purpose. The locked door, the extinguished light, they are part of the design. We must understand the why before we uncover the how. He stepped onto the balcony, bracing himself against the wind's ferocity. Thomas Eldridge's body lay near the railing, his weathered face frozen in a grimace of agony. His hands, blackened and blistered, were clenched as if clutching at some unseen force. His oilskin coat was singed at the cuffs, and a faint, acrid smell lingered, distinct from the salt and spray of the sea. Poirot knelt beside the body, his movements deliberate, almost reverent. He examined the burns, noting their irregular pattern and the rigidity of the limbs, which suggested a violent convulsion at the moment of death. Electrocution, you say, Poirot said, addressing Japp. Yet no source of electricity is apparent. This is most curious. The burns, they are not uniform, as one might expect from a single shock. There is a pattern here, a story in the flesh. Japp scratched his chin. The doctor reckons it was a high voltage, but he's as stumped as I am about where it came from. Could it be something in the beacon itself? A fault in the wiring? Poirot rose, brushing a speck of dust from his sleeve. Let us see this beacon, Inspector. It is, after all, the heart of this mystery. They returned to the beacon room, where the great lens stood silent, its prisms catching the dim light from the storm-shrouded windows. The mechanism was a marvel of engineering, a complex array of gears, pulleys, and wires that powered the rotating lamp. Poirot circled it slowly, his cane tapping a soft rhythm on the stone floor. He paused at the control panel, a tangle of switches and cables, and leaned closer, his magnifying glass glinting in the half-light. "Here," he said, pointing to a small junction box. "There is a disturbance in the wiring. See how this cable is slightly frayed, as if it has been tampered with? And this switch, it is not in its usual position." Jap peered over his shoulder. "Could be wear and tear. This place takes a beating from the weather." "Perhaps," Poirot conceded, but his tone suggested skepticism. "Yet the fraying is too precise, too localized. And this switch, it could be part of a mechanism to interrupt the current at a specific time. A timed device, perhaps, to extinguish the light when it suited the killer's purpose." Hastings, who had been poking about the workbench, held up a small screwdriver. "What about this, Poirot? Could it have been used to tamper with the wiring?" Poirot took the tool, examining it under his magnifying glass. A faint trace of copper residue clung to its tip. "Bien joué, Hastings. This may indeed be a piece of the puzzle, but we must not leap to conclusions. The screwdriver, it is common in such a place. We need more, something that ties the act to the actor." He turned his attention to the desk, where a logbook lay open. The entries, written in Eldridge's neat hand, detailed the lighthouse's operations, fuel levels, maintenance schedules, weather observations. The final entry, dated the previous night, was incomplete, ending mid-sentence. "Storm worsening, visibility poor. Noticed unusual." The pen had skidded across the page, leaving a jagged line. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Unusual," he says. "What did our Monsieur Eldridge notice, I wonder? Something that cost him his life, perhaps?" Jap grunted. "Could be anything. A ship in distress, a fault in the lamp. Doesn't tell us much." "On the contrary, Inspector," Poirot said, closing the logbook with care. "It tells us that Eldridge was alert, observant, and that his final moments were interrupted. This is no accident. Someone ensured he would not finish his thought. They descended to the keeper's quarters, a Spartan room with a coal stove, a narrow bunk, and a table cluttered with charts and mugs. The air was warmer here, but the tension was palpable. Henry Gibbs, the assistant keeper, sat hunched in a chair, his wiry frame tense, his eyes darting nervously. He rose as they entered, wiping his hands on his trousers. "I've told you everything, Inspector," Gibbs said, his voice high and strained. "I was asleep in my bunk when it happened. Didn't hear a thing until I went up at dawn and found him." Poirot regarded him with a steady gaze. "Monsieur Gibbs, you worked closely with Monsieur Eldridge. Tell me, was he a man prone to carelessness? Did he ever tamper with the beacon's wiring himself?" Gibbs shook his head vehemently. "Never. Tom was meticulous, knew that lamp like the back of his hand. If anything was wrong, he'd have spotted it and fixed it proper. And yet," Poirot said, "the lamp was extinguished, and he is dead. You saw no visitors last night? No one who might have had access to the beacon room?" Gibbs hesitated, his fingers twitching. "Well, there was Caleb Morrow, the sailor. Came by around 9, said he needed to talk about the supply boat. And Victor Slade, the merchant, dropped off some crates in the evening. But I didn't see them go up top. I was in the storeroom checking inventory." Poirot nodded, filing the information away. "And your relationship with Monsieur Eldridge?" It was amicable? Gibbs flushed, his jaw tightening. We got on well enough. Been here together 3 years. He was a good man, Tom. Didn't deserve this. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Merci, Monsieur Gibbs. We shall speak again. As Gibbs retreated, Japp leaned in. He's jumpy, isn't he? Reckon he's hiding something? Perhaps, Poirot said, tapping his cane. But fear does not always equal guilt. We must also consider Monsieur Moreau and Monsieur Slade. Each had opportunity, and each, I suspect, has a story to tell. They moved to the storeroom, a cramped space filled with crates, barrels, and coils of rope. Poirot's sharp eyes caught a glint of glass behind a stack of sacks. He gestured to Hastings, who pulled the sacks aside to reveal a crate of unmarked bottles, their contents dark and oily. "Smuggling, do you think?" Hastings asked, his voice low. Poirot lifted a bottle, holding it to the light. Possibly. But why here, in a lighthouse? The beacon's silence. It benefits someone. A ship, perhaps, that wishes to pass unseen. These bottles, they are a clue, but not the whole picture. Japp frowned. Slade's the one to watch, then. Everyone in the village says he's mixed up in shady dealings. Contraband, maybe worse. Poirot's expression was unreadable. We shall see, Inspector. But first, let us return to the beacon room. There is one detail I must confirm. Back in the beacon room, Poirot focused on the floor near the balcony door. A faint scratch, no longer than a fingernail, marked the stone. He knelt, his magnifying glass tracing its path. This, he said, is not the work of chance. Something was dragged here, something heavy, or perhaps something deliberately placed to leave this mark. Hastings scratched his head. A tool? A weapon? Or a distraction, Poirot said, rising. The killer wishes us to see what he wants us to see. But Hercule Poirot, he sees what is hidden. As the storm raged outside, the lighthouse seemed to pulse with secrets. Poirot stood silent for a moment, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The locked door, the extinguished light, the blackened hands, all pieces of a puzzle that, once assembled, would reveal a truth as stark and unforgiving as the cliffs below. We have much to learn, mes amis, he said at last, turning to Japp and Hastings. But the little gray cells, they are awake, and they will not rest until the light of truth shines once more. Chapter 3. The Suspects. The wind had not relented as Hercule Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Japp descended from the beacon room to the keeper's quarters of the Black Rock Lighthouse. The air in the small, low-ceilinged room was thick with the scent of coal smoke and damp wool, a stark contrast to the sterile precision of the machinery above. A single oil lamp cast flickering shadows across the walls, where charts and faded photographs hung in crooked frames. The table, scarred from years of use, bore a teapot and a scattering of chipped mugs, evidence of the frugal life led by the lighthouse keepers. Poirot, ever fastidious, brushed an imaginary speck from his sleeve before seating himself, his sharp eyes taking in every detail of the room's Spartan simplicity. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, who stood warming his hands by the stove. "In a place so isolated, the smallest discord between men can grow like a weed. We must learn who these men are, what drives them, and what secrets they guard." Japp, pacing near the door, nodded curtly. "Right, mister." "Poirot, I've got the 3 of them waiting below in the storeroom. Didn't want them talking to each other before you had a go at them. There's Henry Gibbs, the assistant keeper, Caleb Morrow, the sailor, and Victor Slade, the merchant. Each one was here last night, and each one's got a story that needs testing." Poirot's mustache twitched with the faintest hint of a smile. "Excellent, Inspector. Let us meet these gentlemen and see what the little gray cells can discern from their words and their silences." The storeroom, a step below the quarters, was a cavern of shadows, its walls lined with crates and barrels that seemed to absorb the dim light of a single lantern. The three men stood apart, each in his own corner, as if wary of the others. Poirot entered with the air of a conductor about to lead a symphony, his small frame commanding the space despite its modesty. Hastings followed, notebook in hand, while Japp stood by the door, his presence a reminder of the law's watchful eye. Poirot began with Henry Gibbs, the assistant keeper, who stood nearest the lantern, his thin face drawn and pale. Gibbs was a wiry man in his late 30s, with calloused hands and eyes that darted like a trapped animal's. His woolen jumper was frayed at the cuffs, and his boots bore the scuff marks of constant work. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, his fingers twisting a rag as if it were his only anchor. "Monsieur Gibbs," Poirot said, his voice smooth and precise, "you were here, in this lighthouse, when Monsieur Eldridge met his unfortunate end. Tell me, if you please, exactly what you did last night." Gibbs swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I've told the inspector already, sir. I was off duty, down here in the quarters. Tom, Mr. Eldridge, was up in the beacon room, tending the lamp. It was a rough night, storm coming in, so I stayed below, checking. The stores around 10, I turned in. Didn't hear nothing, didn't see nothing, until I went up at dawn to relieve him. That's when I found the light out and Tom on the balcony." Poirot's eyes narrowed, studying the man's nervous gestures. "You heard nothing at all? No footsteps, no voices, no sound of a struggle? In a tower so small, surely the walls carry whispers." Gibbs shook his head, his voice rising slightly. "It's the storm, sir. It howls like a banshee, drowns out everything. I swear, I was asleep until my watch. I'd never have left Tom if I'd known—" He broke off, his hands trembling. Poirot tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "And your relationship with Monsieur Eldridge? You worked closely, oui? There were no disagreements, no tensions?" Gibbs flushed, his eyes flicking to the floor. "We got along fine, mostly. Tom was a hard man to know, kept to himself, but he was fair. Only—" He hesitated, then plunged on. "He didn't think I was ready to take over as headkeeper. Said I needed more experience. I didn't agree, but I'd never hurt him over it." Never Poirot noted the defensiveness in Gibbs's tone, the slight clench of his jaw. "Merci, Monsieur Gibbs. For now, that is all, but we shall speak again." Next, Poirot turned to Caleb Morrow, the sailor, who leaned against a crate with the easy slouch of a man accustomed to the sea's unpredictability. Morrow was broad-shouldered, his face weathered by sun and salt, with a thick beard that failed to hide a scar running from his jaw to his ear. His oilskin coat glistened with damp, and his boots, caked with sand, left faint trails on the stone floor. He met Poirot's gaze with a steady, almost defiant air. "Monsieur Moreau," Poirot began, "you are a stranger to this lighthouse, yet you were here last night." "Why?" Morrow's voice was low, gravelly. "My ship, the Seahawk, took a beating in the storm 2 nights back, docked at the village for repairs. The lighthouse's supply boat got damaged too, and I came to talk to Tom about sharing costs for fixing it. Got here around 9, stayed maybe half an hour. He was alive when I left, and the light was burning." Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on his cane. "And you saw no one else?" No other visitors to this lonely tower? Morrow's eyes flickered just for a moment before he shook his head. No one. Just Tom, up in the beacon room. He was checking the lamp, said the storm was making it tricky to keep steady. "And you left immediately after your discussion?" Poirot pressed, his tone gentle but insistent. "You did not linger, perhaps to explore this place?" Morrow's jaw tightened. "I'm a sailor, not a snoop. I said my piece and went back to the village. Had no reason to stay." Poirot nodded, his smile polite but probing. "Very well, Monsieur Moreau. Your ship, it is still in the village? I may wish to see it." "It's there," Moreau said curtly. "But you won't find anything to do with this." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "But Hercule Poirot, he leaves no stone unturned." Finally, Poirot approached Victor Slade, the merchant who stood apart, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp and calculating. Slade was a man of middle years, impeccably dressed for a coastal village, with a tailored coat and polished boots that spoke of wealth. His face was smooth, almost too handsome, with a smile that seemed practiced, like an actor awaiting his cue. "Monsieur Slade," Poirot said, his voice taking on a silken edge. "You are a man of business, yet you visit a lighthouse in a storm. What brings you to such a place?" Slade's smile widened, though it did not reach his eyes. "Simple courtesy, Mr. C. Poirot. I supply the lighthouse with provisions, food, fuel, the like. Tom Eldridge placed an order last week, and I delivered it yesterday evening, around 7. We had a quick chat. I left the crates in the storeroom, and I was on my way. Nothing more to it." Poirot's gaze lingered on Slade's hands, which were smooth and uncalloused, unlike those of Gibbs or Morrow. "And you saw nothing unusual? No tension between Monsieur Eldridge and his assistant, perhaps? No other visitors?" Slade shrugged, his demeanor unruffled. All seemed normal. Tom was his usual self, gruff but decent. Gibbs was about, but I didn't speak to him. As for visitors, I wouldn't know. I don't linger where I'm not needed. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "A wise policy, Monsieur Slade. Yet sometimes those who do not linger see more than they admit. We shall see." As Slade stepped back, Japp leaned in, his voice low. "That one's slippery, Mr. Poirot. The village talks about him, say he's got his fingers in all sorts of pies, none of them clean. Smuggling, maybe, using the coves around here." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Indeed, Inspector. Each of these men has a story, but stories, they are like mirrors. Some reflect truth, others distort it. We must look beyond their words." They returned to the keeper's quarters, where Hastings closed his notebook with a sigh. "Well, Poirot, they all sound plausible enough, but someone's lying. Gibbs is a bundle of nerves, Morrow's hiding something, and Slade's too smooth by half." Poirot settled into a chair, his hands folded over his cane. "Exactement, Hastings. Each man carries a piece of the puzzle, but none offers the whole picture. Gibbs, he is afraid, perhaps of guilt, perhaps of something else. Morrow, he is guarded, his story too tidy. And Slade, his charm is a mask. But for what? We must dig deeper, mon ami, into their motives, their movements, their secrets." Japp grunted, lighting a pipe. "I'll have my men check their alibis, but this place is cut off. No one else could have got in without being seen, not in that storm." "Unless," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming, "the storm itself was part of the plan. A cloak of noise and darkness to hide a crime. We must consider the lighthouse itself, Inspector. Its light, its isolation, they are not mere backdrop, but players in this drama. As the wind howled outside, rattling the small window, Poirot's mind churned with possibilities. 3 men, 3 stories, and a dead keeper on a locked balcony. The truth, he knew, lay in the shadows of their words, waiting for the light of his little gray cells to reveal it. Chapter 4. The Lighthouse's Secrets. The storm had not abated as Hercule Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Japp reconvened in the keeper's quarters of the Black Rock Lighthouse. The air was damp, the coal stove hissing softly as it struggled to warm the room. Poirot, seated at the scarred table, sipped a mug of tea prepared by a reluctant Gibbs, his expression one of serene concentration. The flickering lamplight cast his shadow large against the wall, a silent partner to his thoughts. Hastings, ever restless, paced near the window, peering out at the roiling sea, while Japp leafed through a stack of papers from Eldridge's desk, his brow furrowed. "Mon ami," Poirot said, setting down his mug with a delicate clink. "This lighthouse, it is more than a tower of stone and glass. It is a vault of secrets, and we must pry it open. The death of Monsieur Eldridge, the darkened beacon, they are threads in a tapestry we have only begun to unravel." Hastings turned, his hands thrust into his pockets. "I say, Poirot, it's all very well to talk of secrets, but where do we start? That locked door and those burns on Eldridge's hands, they're deuced odd. And those 3 fellows we spoke to, none of them strike me as entirely straight." Japp nodded, tossing the papers aside. "Gibbs is jumpy as a cat. Morrow's got that look of a man who's seen too much. And Slade, well, he's the sort who'd sell his own mother if the price was right. But we've no proof, Mr. Poirot." Not a shred. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache curling slightly. "Proof, Inspector, is like a fish. It must be caught with patience and the right bait. Let us explore this lighthouse, its nooks and corners, and see what it tells us about the night of the crime." They began their search in the beacon room, where the great lens stood silent, its prisms dull without the lamp's glow. Poirot moved with methodical precision, his cane tapping lightly as he examined the machinery. He paused at the control panel, where the frayed cable he had noted earlier still dangled, its insulation worn in a way that suggested deliberate tampering. "This cable," he said, pointing, "it is not the work of time or weather. Someone has interfered, perhaps to create a fault, or to conceal one." Hastings peered over his shoulder, frowning. Could it have caused the electrocution? But how would it reach the balcony? Poirot did not answer immediately, his attention drawn to the floor near the balcony door. The faint scratch he had observed before was clearer in the morning light, a thin arc etched into the stone. He knelt, his magnifying glass glinting as he studied it. "This mark," he said, "it is deliberate, I think. Something was moved here, a tool, a piece of equipment, perhaps to stage the scene or to hide the killer's method." Japp scratched his chin. Could be Gibbs, mucking about with the machinery. He's the one who'd know how it all works. "Perhaps," Poirot said, rising. "But we must not assume. Let us see what else this tower hides." They descended to the storeroom, where the air was thick with the scent of tar and rope. The crates and barrels stood in orderly rows, but Poirot's sharp eyes caught a discrepancy, a gap behind a stack of sacks that seemed out of place. He gestured to Hastings, who, with a grunt, pulled the sacks aside to reveal a wooden crate tucked against the wall. Its lid was loose, and inside were a dozen unmarked bottles, their dark contents glinting in the lantern light. Hastings whistled. Smuggling, I'll bet. Brandy or some such, hidden away where no one'd look. Poirot lifted a bottle, tilting it to catch the light. The liquid inside was viscous, not the clear amber of spirits, but something heavier, almost oily. Not brandy, mon ami, he said. This is something else, perhaps fuel, perhaps something more illicit. Why hide it here, in a lighthouse, and why now, when the beacon goes dark? Japp's eyes narrowed. Slade's work, you reckon? He's the one who brought supplies last night. Could have slipped this in without Eldridge noticing. Poirot's expression was thoughtful. Possibly. But Monsieur Eldridge was a meticulous man. According to Gibbs, he would have checked his stores. This crate, it was hidden with care, yet not so well that we could not find it. A clue, perhaps, left for us to stumble upon, or a mistake by a man in a hurry. They continued their search, moving to the lower levels of the lighthouse. In a narrow passage leading to the supply boat's dock, Poirot noticed a faint smear of grease on the wall, barely visible. He touched it with a gloved finger, sniffing delicately. Machine oil, he said. Not from the beacon, I think. Something smaller, more portable. A tool, perhaps, or a device. Hastings frowned. A device? Like what killed Eldridge? Précisément, Poirot said. We must consider that the electrocution was not an accident of the beacon's wiring, but a deliberate act, using a mechanism brought to this place. The killer, he is clever, but not infallible. Their exploration took them to the dock itself, a rocky inlet where the lighthouse's small boat bobbed against its mooring. The hull was scarred, its planks splintered in a way that suggested more than storm damage. Poirot knelt, examining the wood with his magnifying glass. These marks, he said, they are not the work of waves. See how the wood is gouged, as if struck with force? This boat was sabotaged to keep the lighthouse isolated. Japp's face darkened, so no one could come or go without being noticed. That points to someone who was already here, Gibbs, Morrow, or Slade. Poirot rose, brushing his hands. Or someone who wished it to seem so. The sabotage, it is another piece of the puzzle, but we must fit it carefully. Back in the keeper's quarters, Poirot requested to speak with Gibbs again. The assistant keeper entered, his face pale, his hands still clutching the rag as if it were a talisman. Poirot fixed him with a steady gaze, his voice gentle but probing. Monsieur Gibbs, you have worked here 3 years with Monsieur Eldridge. Tell me, did he ever speak of suspicious activity? Strangers visiting, perhaps, or unusual deliveries? Gibbs hesitated, his eyes flicking to the floor. Tom was private, sir. Didn't talk much about anything but the work. But a few weeks back, he mentioned seeing a light out at sea, late at night. Not a ship's light, he said, too steady, too close to the rocks. Thought it might be smugglers, but he didn't want to jump to conclusions. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A light, you say? And did he investigate? He was going to, Gibbs said. Said he'd keep an eye out, maybe report it to the Coast Guard. But then the storm came, and we were busy with the lamp. I didn't think much of it until now. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. And these crates in the storeroom, the unmarked bottles. Did you know of them? Gibbs shook his head, his voice rising. No, sir. I checked the stores regular, but I never saw those. Tom handled most of the deliveries, especially from Slade. If there was something off, he'd have noticed. Merci, Monsieur Gibbs, Poirot said, dismissing him with a wave. As Gibbs left, Poirot turned to Hastings and Japp. "This light at sea, it is significant. A signal, perhaps, for a ship that wishes to avoid the beacon's gaze. And these bottles, they suggest a trade that thrives in darkness." Hastings rubbed his chin. "Smuggling, then." And Eldridge got in the way. "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but we must ask why the light was extinguished. To hide a ship's passage, but also to conceal the crime itself. The killer, he uses the storm, the isolation, the locked door, all to create a mystery that seems impossible." Japp grunted. "I'll have my men search the coast for signs of a ship. If there's a smuggling ring, Slade's likely at the heart of it." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "We shall see, Inspector. But first, let us return to the village. There are questions to ask and answers to find beyond these stone walls." As they prepared to leave, the lighthouse seemed to hum with unspoken secrets, its darkened beacon a silent witness to the truth Poirot sought. The storm raged on, but within Poirot's mind, the first rays of clarity were beginning to break through. Chapter 5. The Sailor's Tale. The village of Penmore, nestled in a crook of the Cornish coast, was a cluster of weathered cottages huddled against the storm's fury. As Hercule Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Japp made their way from the Black Rock Lighthouse, the wind whipped at their coats, carrying the tang of salt and the distant crash of waves. Poirot, his hat clamped firmly on his head, navigated the muddy path with surprising grace, his ebony cane sinking slightly into the earth with each step. Hastings, trudging beside him, muttered about the weather, while Japp, ever practical, kept his eyes on the village ahead, where lights flickered in the windows of the local pub, the Salty Anchor. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the gale. "In a village such as this, secrets are like the tide. They ebb and flow, but they never truly vanish. We must find Monsieur Moreau and see what lies beneath his sailor's calm." Hastings nodded, pulling his scarf tighter. "Moreau's a tough nut, Poirot. He didn't give much away back at the lighthouse, but that scar of his, and the way he clammed up when you pressed him, makes me think he knows more than he's letting on." Japp grunted, his pipe clenched between his teeth. "He's a sailor, all right. They're a cagey lot, always half a story to tell, but if he's mixed up in this, I'll have it out of him." The Salty Anchor was a low, smoky establishment, its walls stained with years of tobacco and sea air. The patrons, a mix of fishermen and dock workers, glanced up as the trio entered, their conversations faltering under Poirot's precise, foreign presence. Caleb Morrow sat alone at a corner table, nursing a pint of ale, his oilskin coat draped over the chair beside him. His bearded face was impassive, but his eyes, sharp and weathered, tracked their approach with the wariness of a man accustomed to trouble. "Monsieur Moreau," Poirot said, removing his hat with a flourish and seating himself opposite the sailor. "We meet again. You will permit us a few moments of your time." "Oui?" Morrow's gaze flicked from Poirot to Japp, then back again. "I've said all I need to, mister." Poirot. "I was at the lighthouse to talk about the supply boat. Left Tom Eldridge alive and well. Don't know nothing about what happened after." Poirot's smile was polite, almost disarming, but his green eyes were keen as they studied the sailor. "And yet, monsieur, the beacon went dark, and a man is dead. You are a sailor, accustomed to the sea's dangers. You know the importance of a lighthouse's light. Tell me, what did you and Monsieur Eldridge discuss that night? Every detail, if you please." Morrow took a slow sip of his ale, his scarred hand steady on the glass. Like I said, the Seahawk got banged up in the storm. The Lighthouse's boat took a hit too. Same storm, same rocks. I went to see if we could split the cost of repairs, maybe share a boat until ours was fixed. Tom was sympathetic, said he'd talk to the authorities. We had a cup of tea, talked about the weather, and I left. That's it. Poirot leaned forward, his fingers steepled. And the light? It was burning when you departed? You saw nothing unusual, no other visitors, no strange sounds? Morrow's eyes narrowed, a flicker of hesitation crossing his face. The light was on, bright as ever. Storm was loud, but I didn't hear anything odd. No one else was there, far as I saw. Just Tom, up in the beacon room, and Gibbs somewhere below. Poirot's mustache twitched. You are certain, monsieur? No flicker in the lamp, no shadow moving where it should not. Morrow set his glass down with a thud, his voice firm. I'm telling you, it was all normal. I left around 9:30, walked back here through the storm. Ask anyone in the village. They saw me come in, soaked to the bone. Jap, leaning against the wall, spoke up. We'll check that, Morrow. But you've got a reputation around here. Word is you've sailed with some rough crews, maybe even turned a blind eye to cargo that wasn't strictly legal. Morrow's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. I'm a sailor, Inspector. I go where the work is. If you've got accusations, make 'em plain. Poirot raised a hand, his tone soothing. We accuse no one, monsieur. We seek only the truth. Tell me, this Seahawk of yours, where is it docked, and may we inspect it? Morrow's eyes flicked to the side, a brief shadow crossing his face. It's at the village pier, under repair. You can look, but it's just a ship, nothing to do with Tom's death. Perhaps, Poirot said, his smile enigmatic. But Hercule Poirot, he likes to see for himself. Merci, Monsieur Moreau. We shall speak again. As they left the pub, the storm's roar greeted them anew, and Hastings pulled his coat tighter. He's holding something back, Poirot. Did you see how he hesitated when you asked about other visitors? And that business about the ship? I'd wager there's more to it. Poirot nodded, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the cobblestones. Exactement, Hastings. Monsieur Moreau is a man of the sea, but his story is too smooth, like a wave that hides the rocks beneath. We must see this Seahawk and learn what it carries. The village pier was a short walk, its wooden planks slick with spray. The Seahawk, a weathered schooner, rocked gently in its berth, its hull scarred from the recent storm. A pair of crewmen worked on deck, hammering at a damaged rail, but they paused as Jap flashed his badge. Poirot, ignoring the curious stares, climbed aboard with surprising agility, his eyes scanning the deck for anything out of place. The ship was tidy, its ropes coiled and its deck scrubbed, but Poirot's attention was drawn to a small hatch near the stern. He gestured to Jap, who pried it open to reveal a cramped storage compartment. Inside were several crates, their lids nailed shut, but one bore a faint stain. Dark, oily, like the bottles found in the Lighthouse storeroom. Interesting, Poirot murmured, kneeling to examine the crate. This stain, it is familiar, non? We must open it, Inspector. With care, Jap called for a crowbar, and the crate was pried open to reveal more unmarked bottles, identical to those in the Lighthouse. Hastings whistled softly. Smuggling, right enough. But what's this stuff? Not liquor. Surely Poirot lifted a bottle, sniffing delicately. Not liquor, mon ami. This is a type of fuel, perhaps for lamps or engines. But why smuggle it? And why store it in the lighthouse under the nose of a man like Eldridge? Jap's face hardened. Morrow's in it up to his neck, I'd say. He's got access to the ship, and he was at the lighthouse last night. Maybe Eldridge caught him moving this stuff and paid the price. Poirot's expression was thoughtful. Perhaps, Inspector, but we must not rush to judgment. Monsieur Moreau is a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole picture. This fuel, it suggests a purpose, a ship that needs to move unseen, perhaps, or a signal that requires no beacon. They returned to the village, where Poirot insisted on a brief stop at the local telegraph office. He sent a message to a contact in London requesting information on the Sea Hawk's recent voyages and cargo manifests. "Knowledge, mes amis," he said as they stepped back into the storm, "is the light that pierces the darkness of this mystery." Back at the salty anchor, Poirot lingered outside, his eyes on the horizon where the sea met the sky. Monsieur Moreau spoke of the storm, the supply boat, the lighthouse's light, he said, almost to himself. But he did not speak of fear, or guilt, or sorrow. His heart, it is guarded, and we must learn why Hastings shivered, glancing at the dark waves. "You think he's our man, Poirot? Or is it Slade, with his slick talk and shady deals?" Poirot's smile was faint, his eyes distant. "The truth, Hastings, is like the sea. It shifts and conceals, but it always leaves traces. We have found bottles, stains, a sabotaged boat. These are traces, but not the whole truth. We must follow them, to the lighthouse, to the village, to the heart of this crime." As they turned back toward the lighthouse, the wind carried a low moan, as if the sea itself mourned the loss of the beacon's light. Poirot's mind, however, was alight with possibilities, each clue a stepping stone toward the solution he knew was within reach. Chapter 6. The Smuggler's Game. The storm had settled into a restless grumble as Hercule Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Jap made their way to the village of Penmore. The sea's roar, a constant companion. The cobbled streets glistened under a drizzle, and the air was sharp, with the scent of wet stone and seaweed. Poirot, his overcoat buttoned tightly against the damp, moved with his usual precision, his cane clicking against the cobbles like a metronome. Hastings, shielding his face from the wind, muttered about the unrelenting weather, while Jap, pipe clenched between his teeth, scanned the narrow alleys for signs of their quarry. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice clear despite the gusts. "We have seen the lighthouse, the ship, the men who weave their tales around this crime. Now, we must seek the thread that ties them together. Monsieur Slade, I think, holds a key to this mystery, whether he knows it or not." Hastings nodded, his brow furrowed. "Slade's too smooth, Poirot. That smile of his, it's like a snake's, all charm and no warmth. If there's smuggling afoot, he's the one I'd bet on." Jap grunted, puffing on his pipe. "The village has been whispering about Slade for years. Contraband, shady deals, ships coming and going in the dead of night. If he's not our killer, he's mixed up in something that got Eldridge killed." They arrived at Victor Slade's warehouse, a squat, weather-beaten building near the docks, its walls stained with salt and time. The door was ajar, and inside the air was thick with the mingled scents of tobacco, tar, and something sweeter, almost chemical. Crates and barrels lined the walls, some labeled with mundane goods, tea, flour, rope, but others bore no markings, their contents a mystery. Slade stood at a desk in the corner, tallying figures in a ledger, his tailored coat a stark contrast to the rough surroundings. He looked up as they entered, his smile as polished as ever, though his eyes held a flicker of wariness. "Monsieur Slade," Poirot said, removing his hat with a courteous nod. "We meet again. You will forgive our intrusion, but there are questions that demand answers, and this warehouse, I think, has much to tell." Slade closed the ledger with a snap, his smile unwavering. "Mr. Poirot, Inspector, Captain, always a pleasure. I'm just a humble merchant, but I'm happy to help. What's on your mind?" Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting the orderly chaos of the crates, the faint gleam of glass behind a stack of sacks. "You are a man of commerce, Monsieur Slade, and commerce, it thrives on secrets. We have found bottles, unmarked, hidden, in the Lighthouse storeroom, bottles that match those on Monsieur Moreau's ship. Tell me, what do you know of these?" Slade's smile faltered, just for a moment, before he recovered. "Bottles? I deliver all sorts to the Lighthouse, oil, provisions, spare parts. If there's something unusual, it's news to me." Eldridge checked every crate himself. He was particular like that. Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes sharp. "Particular, oui. And yet he is dead, and the beacon is dark. A coincidence, perhaps, or something more deliberate." Slade spread his hands, the picture of innocence. "I'm no killer, Mr. Poirot. I brought supplies, had a quick word with Tom, and left. That's all there is to it." Japp stepped forward, his voice gruff. "We'll see about that, Slade. Mind if we have a look around? If you're as clean as you say, you've got nothing to hide." Slade hesitated, then shrugged. "Be my guest, Inspector, but you'll find nothing but honest goods here." Poirot, ignoring the exchange, moved toward the stack of sacks he had noticed earlier. With a gesture to Hastings, he had the sacks pulled aside, revealing a small crate tucked against the wall. Its lid was loose, and inside, nestled among straw, was a curious device, a metal box no larger than a cigar case, with wires protruding from its sides and a small dial on top. Poirot lifted it carefully, his gloved fingers tracing its contours. "Mon Dieu!" he exclaimed softly. "What have we here? A timer, perhaps? A device to control a circuit, to turn a light on or off at a precise moment?" Slade's face remained impassive, but his fingers twitched at his sides. "That's just a spare part, Mr. Poirot. For machinery, maybe a generator. I deal in all sorts of odds and ends." Poirot's smile was thin, almost predatory. "A spare part, you say, yet it is so neatly crafted, so specific. Tell me, Monsieur Slade, have you ever supplied such a device to the Lighthouse?" Slade shook his head, his voice steady. "Never. If it's there, someone else brought it. I'm not in the business of tinkering with lighthouses." Japp, peering over Poirot's shoulder, frowned. "Looks like something that could mess with the beacon's wiring. If this was used to douse the light, Slade, you're in deeper than you're letting on." Slade's smile tightened. "You're fishing, Inspector." "I'm a businessman, not a saboteur. If you've got evidence, show it. Otherwise, you're wasting my time." Poirot set the device down, his eyes never leaving Slade's face. "Evidence, Monsieur Slade, is like a shadow. It follows the truth, even when unseen. We shall see what this device reveals." Under closer scrutiny, they continued their search, Poirot's keen eyes missing nothing. In a corner, half hidden by a tarpaulin, he found a ledger, its pages filled with cryptic entries, dates, quantities, and abbreviations that meant little to the untrained eye. Poirot flipped through it, noting shipments that coincided with stormy nights, when the lighthouse's beam would be most vital and most vulnerable. "This ledger," he said, holding it up, "it speaks of goods moved in darkness, none? Shipments that avoid the light of day, or the light of Black Rock Slade's composure slipped, his voice sharp. That's private, Mr. Poirot. You've no right to go through my books without a warrant." Jap grinned, stepping forward. "Oh, we'll get one, Slade. And if there's anything in there about smuggling or murder, we'll have you in cuffs before you can blink." Poirot closed the ledger with a snap, his expression serene. "For now, Monsieur Slade, we take only our suspicions. But rest assured, the truth, it will not remain hidden." As they left the warehouse, the drizzle had turned to a steady rain, and Hastings pulled his hat low. "That device, Poirot? It's the key, isn't it? Something to turn off the beacon, just as you thought." Poirot nodded, his cane splashing in a puddle. "Oui, Hastings. A timer, small but precise, to extinguish the light at the critical hour. But why? To allow a ship to pass unseen, perhaps, carrying goods like those bottles we found. And Monsieur Eldridge, he was in the way." Jap puffed on his pipe, the smoke curling into the rain. "Slade's our man, I'd wager. That ledger, those bottles, that device, it all points to him. But how does it tie to the electrocution? That's what's got me stumped." Poirot's eyes gleamed, undeterred by the wet. "The electrocution, Inspector, is the heart of the mystery. A man dies on a balcony, with no wires, no obvious source of power, yet the burns, they do not lie. We must consider a portable device, perhaps, or a trap set with cunning. The lighthouse, it is not just a stage, it is a weapon." They returned to the salty Anchor, where Poirot requested a quiet corner to examine the ledger's pages more closely. With a pencil and notebook, he copied the cryptic entries, his mind working to decode their meaning. "These shipments," he murmured, "they are timed with the tides, with the storms. A pattern, mes amis, that suggests a purpose beyond mere trade." Hastings leaned over, squinting at the scrawled notes. "Smuggling, right enough. But why kill Eldridge? Did he catch Slade red-handed?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice low. "Or perhaps Eldridge saw something he was not meant to see, a light at sea, as Gibbs mentioned, or a ship that should not have been there. The killer, he ensures silence, not just of the man, but of the beacon itself." Jap tapped his pipe against the table. "I'll have my men watch Slade's warehouse tonight. If he's moving goods, we'll catch him in the act, and I'll get that device to the lab. See if it's what you think." Poirot nodded, his gaze distant. "Do so, Inspector. But we must also watch Monsieur Moreau and Monsieur Gibbs. Each plays a role in this game, and the board is not yet fully revealed." As the rain drummed on the pub's roof, Poirot's thoughts turned back to the lighthouse, its darkened beacon, a silent challenge. The smuggler's game was afoot, and he was determined to play it to its end, with the little gray cells as his sharpest weapon. Chapter 7. The locked door, the Black Rock Lighthouse, loomed against the stormy sky, its stone walls unyielding to the wind's relentless battering. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of oil and metal, a stark reminder of the beacon's silent vigil. Hercule Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Jap stood once more in the beacon room, where the great Fresnel lens gleamed dully in the muted light filtering through the storm-shrouded windows. The iron door to the balcony, now broken open from Jap's earlier efforts, stood as a mute witness to the mystery of Thomas Eldridge's death. Poirot's eyes, sharp and unyielding, fixed on the heavy bolt that had once secured it, his mind a whirl of calculations. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Hastings, who was rubbing his hands against the chill. "This door, it is the heart of our puzzle, bolted from within, yet a man lies dead outside, and the beacon is extinguished. It is a riddle that mocks us, but Hercule Poirot, he does not succumb to mockery." Hastings frowned, peering at the door's rusted bolt. "It's a proper stumper, Poirot. If the door was locked from the inside, how did the killer get out? And how did they manage to electrocute Eldridge out there, with no wires or anything of the sort?" Jap, standing with his hands on his hips, nodded grimly. "That's what's got me, mister. Poirot. The doctor's sure it was electrocution. Those burns don't lie. But there's nothing on that balcony to cause it. And the bolt, Gibbs swore it was shut tight when he found the body. Had to break the door down to get to Eldridge. Poirot approached the door, his cane tapping softly on the stone floor. He ran a gloved finger along the bolt, noting its stiffness and the faint scratches around its socket, observed earlier, but now demanding closer scrutiny. "This bolt," he said, "it is old, but functional. It requires strength to move, yet it was engaged when the body was found. Let us test its secrets." He motioned to Hastings. "Mon ami, you are a man of action. Please, attempt to slide the bolt, as if you were locking the door from within." Hastings, eager to contribute, grasped the bolt and pushed. It moved with a grating screech, requiring considerable effort to slide into place. "Blimey, it's stiff," he said, stepping back. "No wonder Gibbs needed a crowbar." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing as he examined the doorframe. The tiny notch he had noticed before, barely wider than a hair, caught his attention again. He produced his magnifying glass, its lens glinting as he leaned closer. "Regardes," he said, pointing to the notch. "This mark, it is not natural wear. It suggests something was inserted here, a thin tool, perhaps a wire or a blade, to manipulate the bolt from outside." Jap's brow furrowed. "From outside? But how? The door's solid iron, and that notch is barely a scratch." Poirot's smile was faint but confident. "A scratch, Inspector, can be as revealing as a shout. Let us conduct an experiment. Hastings, please, fetch a piece of wire from the workbench. Something fine, like that used in the beacon's wiring." Hastings rummaged through the tools, returning with a length of thin copper wire, its end slightly bent. Poirot took it, positioning himself outside the balcony door, which Jap's men had propped back into place for their investigation. With delicate precision, he inserted the wire into the notch, angling it toward the bolt's mechanism. After a moment of careful probing, a faint click echoed in the room as the bolt shifted slightly. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot exclaimed, stepping back. "It is possible, mes amis. With a tool such as this, one could slide the bolt from outside, creating the illusion of a locked room. The killer, he is clever, but not invisible." Hastings' eyes widened. "So the locked door was a trick? The killer bolted it after Eldridge was dead." "Précisément," Poirot said, handing the wire to Jap. "This notch, it is the killer's mistake, a small one, but enough to betray him. The door was not locked to keep someone out, but to make us believe no one could have entered." Jap pocketed the wire, his face grim. "That narrows it down to someone who knew the lighthouse well enough to pull it off. Gibbs, maybe. He's got the run of the place. Or Slade, with his knack for gadgets." Poirot tilted his head, his expression thoughtful. "Or Monsieur Moreau, who knows the sea and its tools, but we must not assume too quickly. The door is only one piece of the puzzle. The electrocution, it remains the greater enigma. They stepped onto the balcony, where the wind lashed at them with renewed fury. Eldridge's body had been removed, but the spot where he had fallen was marked by a chalk outline, its edges smudged by the rain. Poirot knelt, examining the iron railing that encircled the platform. He noted a faint discoloration on one section, a patch where the rust seemed less pronounced, as if something had been clamped there and recently removed. "This railing," he said, pointing, "it is not as it seems. See how the rust is disturbed? Something was here, a clamp, a wire, perhaps a device that carried a current." Hastings shivered, not entirely from the cold. "A device? You mean something portable, brought up here to kill him?" Poirot rose, brushing his gloves. "Exactly, Hastings. The burns on Monsieur Eldridge's hands, they suggest a sudden, powerful shock, not from the beacon's wiring, which is intact, but from something else, a trap, set with precision to deliver death and then be removed." Japp scratched his chin, his pipe forgotten. "Like that timer we found in Slade's warehouse? Could it be part of it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The timer, it could control the beacon's light, extinguishing it at the critical moment. But the electrocution, it requires something more, a source of power, a conductor. We must search for traces of such a device, here or elsewhere in the lighthouse." They returned to the beacon room, where Poirot resumed his examination of the control panel. He traced the wiring with his magnifying glass, pausing at a junction where a small screw appeared slightly misaligned, as if it had been removed and replaced. "This," he said, "is another clue. The killer, he tampers with the beacon's mechanism, but not to cause the electrocution directly. It is a diversion, perhaps, to draw our eyes from the true method. Hastings, ever practical, looked skeptical. But where's the power coming from? There's no generator out on the balcony, and the lighthouse's system is all up here." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "A battery, mon ami, a portable source, small enough to carry, powerful enough to kill. Such things exist, used in ships or machinery. We must look for signs of it, in the storeroom, in Slade's warehouse, on Morrow's ship." Japp nodded, jotting a note. "I'll have my men scour the place again. And we'll check Slade's warehouse for anything like a battery or a portable generator. If it's there, we'll find it." Poirot turned to the desk, where Eldridge's logbook still lay open, its final entry a jagged scrawl. "Storm worsening, visibility poor. Noticed unusual." He traced the words with a gloved finger, his mind racing. "Unusual," he murmured. "What did you see, Monsieur Eldridge? A device, a person, a light at sea? Your silence, it speaks louder than words." As they descended to the keeper's quarters, Poirot's thoughts were a whirl of possibilities. The locked door, once an impossible barrier, was now a solved riddle, but the method of the electrocution remained elusive. He paused at the foot of the stairs, his gaze distant. The killer, he is bold, mes amis. He uses the storm, the lighthouse, the very isolation of this place to weave his illusion. But every illusion has a flaw, and we shall find it. Hastings, trailing behind, shook his head. "It's devilishly clever, Poirot. The bolted door, the electrocution, the darkened beacon, it's like something out of a nightmare." Poirot's eyes twinkled, undaunted. "A nightmare, oui, but one we shall awaken from. The truth, it is like the tide. It recedes, but it always returns. We must be patient, and the lighthouse, it will yield its secrets." As the storm raged outside, the beacon room seemed to pulse with the weight of its mysteries. Poirot, his little gray cells alight, felt the puzzle drawing closer to resolution, each clue a step toward the light of truth. Chapter 8. The Motive Revealed. The storm had retreated to a sullen murmur as Hercule Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Japp gathered in the keeper's quarters of the Black Rock Lighthouse. The room, warmed by the coal stove's faint glow, felt oppressive with the weight of the mystery. The oil lamp on the table cast long shadows, flickering across the charts and photographs that lined the walls, as if the lighthouse itself were whispering its secrets. Poirot sat with his hands folded over his cane, his green eyes gleaming with the quiet intensity of a man who sensed the truth drawing near. Hastings, restless, stood by the window, watching the sea's restless churn, while Japp paced, his pipe sending curls of smoke into the air. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice precise and measured, "we have seen the clues, heard the stories, and uncovered the tricks of this crime. The locked door, the extinguished beacon, the burns on poor Monsieur Eldridge's hands, they are pieces of a puzzle that now begins to take shape. Tonight, we shall assemble it, and the truth, it will shine like the lighthouse itself." Hastings turned, his brow furrowed. "You've got it figured out, Poirot?" "The whole thing, the electrocution, the bolted door, the smuggling." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile beneath it. "Not all, mon ami, but enough to call our suspects together. The motive, it is the heart of this crime, and I believe I see its pulse. Inspector, if you please, summon Messieurs Gibbs, Morrow, and Slade. We shall have a little reunion in this room, where the light of truth will expose the guilty." Japp nodded, his face grim but eager. "Right, Mr. Poirot. I'll have my men round them up. They're all in the village, Gibbs at his lodgings, Morrow at the pub, Slade at his warehouse. Won't take long." Within the hour, the three men were ushered into the keeper's quarters, their faces a study in contrasts. Henry Gibbs, pale and twitchy, his hands twisting a worn cap. Caleb Morrow, stoic but wary, his scarred face unreadable. Victor Slade, polished and composed, his smile a mask that betrayed nothing. They stood apart, eyeing each other with suspicion, as Japp's constables took up positions by the door. The room felt smaller with their presence, the air thick with unspoken tension. Poirot rose, his small frame commanding the space with an authority that belied his stature. "Messieurs," he began, his voice carrying the weight of certainty, "we are here to discuss the death of Thomas Eldridge, a man who guarded this lighthouse with devotion, only to meet his end in a manner most cruel. He was electrocuted on a locked balcony, the beacon extinguished, the door bolted from within. It is a crime that appears impossible, yet Hercule Poirot, he does not believe in the impossible." Gibbs shifted uneasily, his voice low. "I told you, sir, I was asleep. I didn't hear nothing until I found him at dawn." Morrow's jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on Poirot. "And I was gone by 9. The light was burning when I left." Slade's smile was smooth, almost mocking. "You're barking up the wrong tree, Mr. Poirot. I delivered supplies and left. I'm no murderer." Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. "Patience, monsieur. Let us reconstruct the night of the crime, step by step, and see where the truth lies. Monsieur Eldridge was a meticulous man. Oui? He kept a log, noted every detail of his work. His final entry, it speaks of something unusual. A light at sea, perhaps, or a discovery that threatened someone's plans. This discovery, I believe, was his undoing. He paced slowly, his cane tapping a rhythm on the floor. The lighthouse, it is a beacon of safety, but also a sentinel that sees too much. Its light reveals what some wish to hide. A ship, perhaps, moving through the darkness with cargo that must not be seen. The bottles we found, hidden in the storeroom and on Monsieur Moreau's ship, they are not mere contraband. They are fuel, for a purpose we shall soon uncover. And the beacon, it was extinguished to allow this ship to pass unnoticed. Moreau's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Gibbs swallowed hard, his cap nearly torn in his hands. Slade's smile flickered, a crack in his composure. Poirot turned to the assistant keeper. "Monsieur Gibbs, you told us of a light at sea, seen by Eldridge weeks ago. You said he meant to report it. Did he suspect smuggling, perhaps? Or did he confront someone about it?" Gibbs shook his head, his voice trembling. "He didn't say much, sir. Just that he'd keep watch. I didn't think it was serious, not enough to get him killed." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Moreau. "And you, Monsieur Moreau, you came to discuss a boat, but your ship, the Seahawk, carries bottles like those in the lighthouse. Were you part of this hidden trade, or merely a witness?" Moreau's scarred face hardened. "I told you, I'm a sailor. I carry what I'm paid to carry. If there's fuel on my ship, it's for the engines, nothing more." Poirot's smile was thin. "And yet, the storm provided cover, did it not? A perfect night for a ship to slip through, unseen by a darkened beacon." He turned to Slade, his eyes piercing. "Monsieur Slade, you are a man of business, with a warehouse full of secrets. A timer found among your goods could extinguish a light at a precise moment. Your ledger, it speaks of shipments on stormy nights, and you were here, the last to see Eldridge alive. Tell me, what did you discuss with him that evening?" Slade's smile held, but his voice was tight. "Provisions, mister." "Poirot, nothing more. If you've got evidence, show it. I'm not afraid of your theories." Poirot's expression was serene, but his words were sharp. "Theories, Monsieur Slade, become facts when the pieces align. Let us consider the crime itself. Eldridge was electrocuted on the balcony, a place with no wires, no obvious source of power. Yet the burns on his hands, they are real. A portable device, I propose. A battery or generator, small enough to carry, powerful enough to kill. And the door, bolted from within, was locked from outside with a wire through a notch in the frame, a trick to make the crime seem impossible." Gibbs gasped, his cap falling to the floor. Moreau's eyes flicked to Slade, who remained still, his smile now a grimace. Poirot continued, his voice rising slightly. "The motive, monsieur, is clear. Eldridge discovered a smuggling operation, fuel, perhaps, for illicit trade, moved through these waters under cover of storm and darkness. The beacon's light threatened to expose this trade, so it was extinguished. But Eldridge, he saw too much. He was lured to the balcony, where a trap, an electrified wire connected to a hidden battery, was waiting. The killer, he bolts the door with his clever tool, leaving us to puzzle over a locked room mystery." He stopped, facing Slade directly. "You, Monsieur Slade, are the architect of this scheme. You supplied the timer found in your warehouse to douse the beacon. You hid the fuel in the lighthouse, and when Eldridge confronted you, you set a trap to silence him. The wire, the battery, the bolted door, all your work to protect your trade." Slade's face paled, his smile gone. "That's nonsense, Poirot. You've got no proof, just a timer and some bottles. Anyone could have planted them." Japp stepped forward, his voice hard. "We're searching your warehouse again, Slade. And we've got the ledger, the device, the bottles. If there's a battery or a wire to match, you're done for." Poirot's eyes never left Slade's. The scratches on the beacon room floor, the notch in the doorframe, the tampered wiring, they betray you, monsieur. You thought to outwit us, but the little gray cells, they see through your illusion. The room was silent, save for the wind's low moan outside. Gibbs and Morrow exchanged glances, their tension easing as Slade's composure crumbled. Poirot's voice softened, but its authority remained. "Confess, Monsieur Slade. The truth, it is a tide that cannot be held back." Slade's shoulders slumped, his voice a whisper. "I didn't mean to kill him." He found the timer, started asking questions. "I rigged a wire to scare him, a shock, nothing more. But it was too strong. I panicked, bolted the door to make it look like an accident." Japp signaled his men, who moved to cuff Slade. "You're under arrest, Slade. Smuggling and murder, that's a long stretch." As Slade was led away, Poirot turned to Hastings and Japp. "The motive, mes amis, was greed, cloaked in cunning. But the Lighthouse, it sees all, and its secrets, they are no match for the truth." Chapter 9. The Confession. The keeper's quarters of the Black Rock. Lighthouse were bathed in the soft glow of the oil lamp, its light casting wavering shadows across the rough-hewn walls. The storm outside had dwindled to a low grumble, as if the sea itself had grown weary of its own fury. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small frame radiating quiet authority, his green eyes fixed on Victor Slade, whose polished facade had crumbled under the weight of accusation. Captain Hastings leaned against the table, his notebook open but forgotten, while Inspector Japp stood near the door, his face stern, one hand resting on the handcuffs at his belt. Henry Gibbs and Caleb Morrow, their roles as suspects now clarified, stood to one side, their expressions a mix of shock and relief. "Mon Dieu," Poirot said, his voice calm but resonant. "The truth, it is like the beacon of this lighthouse. It cannot be extinguished for long. Monsieur Slade, you have admitted to rigging a trap for Thomas Eldridge, a trap that led to his death. But let us be precise, if you please. Tell us the full story, from the beginning, so that justice may be served." Slade, his tailored coat now rumpled, slumped in a chair, his hands cuffed behind him. The smooth charm that had defined him was gone, replaced by a haggard look, his eyes darting as if seeking an escape that no longer existed. "I told you, Poirot," he said, his voice low and strained. "It wasn't meant to kill him. It was an accident, a terrible mistake." Japp snorted, his pipe clenched tightly. "An accident? You set up an electrified wire, bolted the door to make it look impossible, and you call it an accident? Come off it, Slade. You're in deep, and lying won't help." Hastings, his brow furrowed, leaned forward. "Why Eldridge, Slade? What did he do to make you go to such lengths? And what's all this about the fuel and the timer?" Poirot raised a hand, his gesture silencing the room. "Patience, mes amis. Monsieur Slade, you will start at the beginning. The smuggling, the beacon, the night of the crime. Tell us everything. The little gray cells, they have pieced much together, but your words, they will complete the picture." Slade's shoulders sagged, his gaze dropping to the floor. After a long moment, he began to speak, his voice halting but clear. "It started months ago. The coves around Penmore, they're perfect for moving goods without prying eyes. Fuel mostly for ships that don't want to be tracked. Not just any fuel, specialized for high-speed boats running routes to the continent. There's a market for it, and I saw an opportunity." Morrow's scarred face darkened, but he remained silent. Gibbs, clutching his cap, stared at Slade as if seeing him for the first time. Slade continued, his words tumbling out. "The lighthouse was the problem. Its beam sweeps too far, sees too much. A ship moving at night, especially in a storm, needs darkness to slip through. I'd been paying off a contact to dim the light on certain nights, but Eldridge, he was too sharp. He noticed the patterns, started asking questions. A few weeks back, he saw a signal light out at sea. One of my runners. He didn't report it right away, but he was watching, always watching." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And so, you devised a plan to ensure his silence, oui? The timer we found in your warehouse, it was to extinguish the beacon at a precise moment?" Slade's jaw tightened. "Yes, it was simple. A small device to cut the power for an hour, just long enough for my ship to pass through. I hid it in the beacon room, wired it into the system. Eldridge never suspected until that night. He caught me checking it. Late, after I'd delivered the supplies. He was furious, said he'd go to the Coast Guard, ruin everything." Hastings' eyes widened. "So you killed him to keep him quiet?" "It wasn't meant to be like that." Slade's voice rose, a note of desperation creeping in. "I rigged a wire on the balcony, a low-voltage shock, just to scare him, make him back off. I'd done it before, on other jobs, to keep people in line. I lured him out there, said I'd seen something odd in the storm. The wire was connected to a battery, hidden under the railing. But something went wrong. The current was stronger than I planned. He grabbed the wire and he was gone before I could stop it." Japp's face was thunderous. "You left him there, dead, and bolted the door to cover your tracks?" Slade nodded, his voice barely audible. "I panicked, used a thin blade to slide the bolt through a notch in the frame, made it look like he'd locked himself out. I thought it'd seem like an accident, a fault in the beacon's wiring. I took the battery and wire, hid them in my warehouse. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his tone sharp. "And the fuel in the storeroom? The bottles on Monsieur Morrow's ship? They were part of your trade, non?" Slade hesitated, then nodded. "The bottles in the lighthouse were a drop-off, meant for pickup by my crew. The Seahawk was carrying some, too, but Morrow didn't know what it was. He's just a sailor, paid to look the other way." Morrow's fists clenched, but he held his tongue, his glare fixed on Slade. Gibbs, meanwhile, looked as if he might be sick, his cap now a crumpled mass in his hands. Poirot paced slowly, his cane tapping a deliberate rhythm. "You are a man of ambition, Monsieur Slade, but ambition without conscience is a dangerous thing. You extinguished the beacon to hide your trade, and when Monsieur Eldridge threatened to expose you, you extinguished him as well. The locked door, the electrified wire, they were your attempt to outwit justice, but justice, it is not so easily deceived." Slade's head bowed, his voice a whisper. "I didn't want him dead. I just wanted to keep things quiet. The money, it was too good to lose." Japp stepped forward, his handcuffs glinting in the lamplight. "You're under arrest, Slade, for murder and smuggling. We'll sort out the charges at the station, but you're not slipping out of this one." As the constables led Slade away, Gibbs sank into a chair, his face pale. "I can't believe it," he muttered. "Tom was my friend. I should have seen something, done something." Morrow, his voice gruff, spoke at last. "I didn't know about the fuel, not really. Thought it was just cargo. If I'd known it'd lead to this." He trailed off, shaking his head. Poirot turned to them, his expression softening. "Messieurs, you are not to blame. The guilt lies with Slade, who used the lighthouse as a tool for his greed. But you must speak the truth, always, to prevent such shadows from falling again." Jap clapped a hand on Poirot's shoulder. "You've done it again, Mr. Poirot. That locked door business. I'd have never twigged the wire trick, and the timer, the fuel, it all fits." Hastings, closing his notebook, grinned. "Your gray cells, Poirot, they're worth their weight in gold, but I still can't quite believe how neatly Slade pulled it off." Poirot's smile was modest, but his eyes gleamed. "Neatly, oui, but not perfectly. Every crime leaves a trace, Hastings, and the little gray cells, they find it. Now, let us ensure the beacon shines once more to guide the ships and the truth home." As the constables escorted Slade to the waiting police wagon, the lighthouse stood silent, its secrets laid bare. The storm had passed, but the memory of its darkness lingered, a reminder of the cost of greed and the power of truth. Chapter 10. The light restored. The storm that had battered the Cornish coast for days had finally relented, leaving behind a sky bruised with clouds but pierced by the first hesitant rays of evening sun. The Black Rock Lighthouse stood resolute against the fading tempest, its stone tower a sentinel over the now calmer sea. Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings stood on the cliff's edge, the wind tugging gently at their coats as they gazed at the lighthouse. The great beacon, silent for too long, had been relit that evening, its beam cutting through the gathering dusk with a steady, reassuring pulse. The air carried the clean scent of salt and damp earth, a stark contrast to the tension that had gripped the tower only hours before. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice soft but clear. "It is a fitting end, is it not? The light shines again, as it must, to guide the lost and to honor the truth. The death of Monsieur Eldridge was a tragedy, but the darkness, it has been dispelled." Hastings, his hands in his pockets, nodded, his eyes fixed on the beacon's rhythmic sweep. "You've done it again, Poirot. Unraveled a puzzle that seemed impossible. Locked doors, electrocution, smuggling. I'll never know how you see through it all." Poirot's mustache twitched with a modest smile. "The little gray cells, Hastings, they are like the lighthouse itself, casting light where shadows lie. But they require facts, observation, and the courage to see what others overlook." They turned from the cliff, making their way back to the village of Penmore, where Inspector Japp awaited them at the salty Anchor. The pub was quieter now, its patrons subdued by the news of Victor Slade's arrest. Japp sat at a corner table, a pint before him, his pipe sending lazy curls of smoke into the air. He rose as they entered, his face a mix of weariness and satisfaction. "Well, Mr. Poirot," Japp said, shaking his hand, "you've tied this one up neatly. Slade's in custody, and we've got enough evidence to put him away for a long stretch. Murder, smuggling, the lot. The Coast Guard's already sniffing around his warehouse, and they've found more of that fuel on a boat just offshore." Poirot settled into a chair, his cane resting across his knees. "Bon, Inspector. And the device, the timer, and the battery, they have been examined?" Japp nodded, taking a sip of his ale. "Sent to the lab this afternoon. Early reports say the timer matches the beacon's wiring perfectly. Slade's work, no doubt. The battery's a bit trickier, but they're testing it for traces of the wire he used. It's a nasty piece of work, rigging a trap like that? Hastings, settling beside Poirot, shook his head. Nasty's the word for it. Poor Eldridge, just doing his job, and he stumbles into a smuggling ring. If he hadn't spotted that light at sea, he might still be alive. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his fingers tapping lightly on his cane. Oui, Hastings, the light at sea. It was the spark that lit this tragedy. Monsieur Eldridge, he was a man of duty. And duty, it can be a dangerous thing when it crosses the path of greed. Slade's ambition was his downfall, but it was Eldridge's vigilance that set the stage. Japp leaned back, puffing on his pipe. What I don't get is how you pieced it all together so fast. The locked door, the wire, the motive. That notch in the frame, the scratches on the floor. I'd have missed them entirely. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The details, Inspector, they are the threads of the tapestry. The notch, it betrayed the trick of the bolt. The scratches, they spoke of a device moved in haste. The fuel, the timer, the ledger, they wove a story of smuggling, and the burns on Eldridge's hands, they pointed to a trap. Each clue, it is a note in a symphony. And Hercule Poirot, he conducts the music of truth. Hastings chuckled, raising his glass. A symphony, eh? Well, you've played it masterfully, as always. But what about Gibbs and Morrow? They're in the clear, but they must be shaken. Poirot nodded, his expression softening. Monsieur Gibbs, he is a man of loyalty, but his fear made him seem guilty. Monsieur Morrow, he sails close to the wind, carrying cargo without asking questions. But his heart was not in the crime. They are free, but they will carry the weight of this affair for some time. It is the price of living in the shadow of such a tragedy. Japp set his pipe down, his voice thoughtful. The village will be talking about this for years. A lighthouse keeper murdered, a smuggling ring busted. It's the kind of story that grows legs. But at least the beacon's back on, and the ships are safe. Poirot rose, adjusting his scarf with care. And that, Inspector, is the true victory. The light of Black Rock shines again, a beacon not only for ships, but for justice. Let us hope it guides others away from the rocks of greed and deceit. As they stepped outside, the night was clear, the stars emerging above the sea. The lighthouse's beam swept across the horizon, a steady pulse that seemed to echo Poirot's resolve. Hastings, glancing back, felt a surge of admiration for his friend. "You know, Poirot," he said, "I reckon you could solve a mystery in the dark, with nothing but your wits." Poirot's eyes twinkled in the starlight. "Perhaps, mon ami. But even Hercule Poirot prefers a little light to work by. Come, let us return to London. The sea, it has told its tale, and we have other puzzles to solve." As they walked toward the village, the beacon's light followed them, a silent promise that truth, like the tide, would always return.